Okay, let's start. So starting from today, we are going to go through the HCSP training course. So the HCSP contents will include the high availability, the advanced configuration for VPN part, including the IPsec and advanced SSL VPN, and also some virtualized technology, the interface, as well as the SSL proxy, how we can use the SSL proxy and SSL offloading to decrypt the encrypted traffic, and also the load balancing feature. First of all, let's have a look at the StoneOS HA functions. In this chapter, I'm going to show you guys the high availability that we developed in Houston product and the commonly deployment for the HA, as well as the HA content introduction, how to configure the HA in different scenarios. The reason why we need the high availability for the firewall deployment is because the single point of the failure that the customer facing during the operation of their business, they need to find a way to improve the reliability of their service continuity. Previously, if customer only deployed a single firewall into their network through the inline mode, if something wrong with the firewall or the firewall failed, that will cause the single point of the failure. In this case, the service will be down. So in this case, for these specific customers who are looking for a high reliability for their business or service, we can offer through the high availability functions or solutions. The HA solutions from Houston, we are offering for both hardware-based and also software HA to improve the reliability of the product. For the system part, all our firewalls can support to deploy in high availability for both active, passive, and active mode. And we also support for the middle end and high end product. We have the hardware-based bypass modules, which can support the interface bypass if the device failed. And for hardware part, our data center firewall also support the redundant power supply and the fan trees. And even for our high-end, middle-end, and high-end NG firewall, we also support the redundant power supply. For the devices that had the expansion slots available, especially for the data center firewall, for this service control module and also the switch module, we support to be deployed in redundant. In this case, we can provide the high availability for the whole system. And for software, we also support the ISSU, which will support the non-interruption during the system upgrading in HA environment. The high availability, which is the failover solution that offered to the customer in case the communication line or the service or the device failed to transmit the traffic and ensure the smooth communication and effectively improve the reliability of the whole network. In order to implement the HA functions in Houston NG firewall, you need to group two firewalls as in one HA cluster. Both firewalls must has the identical hardware platforms. So that means you have to use the same platform to form a HA, and also the firmware version. That means the firmware installed at both firewalls must be the same, because for different firmware, the supported functions probably different. And also licenses. Licenses is used to control for some specific features. We also need to assure both devices can support same features or same services. And also you need to have the same enablement of the virtual router and also other functions. So that is the prerequisites between when you decide to deploy the firewall in HA. You must make sure both firewalls has identical hardware, software, license, and services functions. The HA can be deployed in different modes. We support the SCM HA for the data center firewall. That means the hardware-based control module can be deployed in redundant, just in case if the master card failed, so all the measurement will switch to the backup. And for the device-based HA, so you can choose to deploy two firewall devices locally in active-passive mode or active-active mode. For active-active, we support for both common active-active HA and also the specific peer mode. If the firewall deployed in the asymmetric traffic environment. And we also support the innovative twin mode solution for HA, which is the firewall-based active-active solution for the active-active data centers. In this picture, as you can see, this is our data center firewall, and we can deploy two SCM and two SSM to form as a group to provide the high availability. So the master SCM will help to do the overall system measurement. If the master card failed, it will switch to the backup to provide the whole system measurement. That is for the hardware-based SCM HA in data center firewall. And for the device firewall, the device HA, as I mentioned, we support the active-passive. So in this case, we have two firewalls that form in one HA cluster. So one firewall will be selected as the master, another is as a backup. So the master one will take the role to forward all the traffic, and the backup will not perform any action for the traffic forwarding, but just backup all those configurations and sessions from the master. If master down, all the traffic will be switched through the backup. The second scenario for HA is the active. In this case, we also have two firewalls, and both firewalls will be in active status to forward the traffic simultaneously. So we need to form two groups. One is for group 0, another is for group 1. So in this case, both firewall will forward the traffic. If one firewall failed, the traffic will be switched to another. And pure mode is the scenario, as I mentioned, if the firewall devices are deployed in the full mesh router environment, and there will be some asymmetric traffic pass through the firewall. In this case, we need to use the pure mode to support the asymmetric traffic forwarding. So that is the pure mode. The twin mode solution, which is used to support the active data center. If customer have two data centers in different location to provide the same service for the users, and they have already built their internal communication between both data centers through the large layer 2 network, for example, using the Cisco DCI devices. In this case, we can deploy Hailstone Firewall as a gateway protection and also form in high availability to support the asymmetric traffic forwarding. If one side failed, so the traffic will be switched through another data center, switched to another data center, and the firewalls in data center B will also help to handle the traffic. These slides give you guys some idea what is the difference between the master and backup devices in HA. First of all, the master device will need to do the whole configuration management, and all the management configuration will be configured at the master device. And the backup device only need to set for some local configuration. For example, for some local management IP and the HA configurations, only for that. And the second one, the interface that worked in master will send and receive the packets, will help to forward the packets. And backup, they only send and receive this management, the heartbeat packets between the master and backup, or the self-management. And master will help to do the ARP response. And backup only respond for the ARP of the measurement IP, Master device will process for all the service traffic. And backup will not process for any service traffic. The service interface in master that for the traffic forwarding uses a virtual MAC address for the communication. And in backup device, all the interfaces, they use their real MAC address. So those are the difference between master and backup. Here are some HA terms or concept. First of all is the HA cluster. The HA cluster is the concept that we used to form two devices as a single to handle the traffic and provide the security functions. The cluster is identified by the cluster ID, So we need to specify the HA cluster ID for those two devices that we used in HA. If you have multiple devices or multiple HA need to be formed in, if you have multiple devices that need to be deployed in HA in different position, you need to use the cluster to separate the different HA deployment. And second one will be the HA group. HA group is the one that we used to group two firewalls in one HA deployment. And we will select the master and backup device in this group according to the HCMP protocol and also the HA configuration that we set. And the master device is the one that actively process for the traffic. If the master device failed, the backup device will take over. When you're assigning the cluster ID for the device, by default, the HA group 0 will be automatically created. So in active passive mode, we only need one group for those two firewalls, which is group 0. If you're using active, the device will need to use two groups. One is group 0, another is group 1 for the active traffic. And next one is the HA link interface, which is used for the HA negotiation, for the synchronization of the configurations, and also send the status and failure notification message between both devices. That is the HA link interface. And also we have a virtual mark, as I mentioned, in the HA environment. So each of the group, they sharing one interface to forward the traffic, which is known as the virtual forward interface. So this interface that managed a virtual mark, which is corresponding with this interface, and the traffic will be forwarded through this interface. So different HA group in one cluster, they cannot forward data among each other. So VMark will be defined by the HA base mark, the cluster ID, the group ID, and also the physical interface index. If you're using Cloud Edge to do the HA, so all interfaces that are using the real MAC address, but not a virtual mark. So that is the difference comparing with the hardware-based firewall. When you're configuring for the HA between two devices, you need to understand for some of the parameters. The first one is the priority. Priority is the one that we used to decide the priority of the two devices that in HA. The one with smaller number, it will have higher priority. So the one with smaller number will have high priority, and then this one will be promoted as the master device. And second is the hello interval. Hello interval were used to specify the hello interval value, which is the interval for the HA device to send the heartbeat packet, which is the hello packets, to others that in the HA group. And there's also the threshold. Threshold will specify the threshold value of the hello message, And another one is monitor track, which we use this track object to monitor the status of the device, We need to use this to track, especially for the master device. If the track failed, the traffic will be switched to the backup. The backup will be promoted as a master device, to handle the traffic. And the last one is the preempt. So preempt, if you enable the preempt in the master device, if the master device failed, so normally the traffic will be switched to the backup. But if you set the preempt in master, after the master device backup and recovered, so the master device will take over all the traffic and preempt himself as master again. So that is the preempt. So this slide will show you the different status in HA negotiation. So first of all will be the initiation. So both sides will communicate by sending the heartbeat packets. By judging the priority for both devices, the firewall that with higher priority will be selected as a master, and another will be a backup. If master failed to perform the service, it will notify to the backup with the failed message, and then the backup will be promoted to the master. Standalone, if you are not using HA, so both firewalls are working in standalone. HA synchronization. So if you deployed both firewall in HA, so the backup device need to synchronize all those information from the master device. So master device will synchronize those three types of the information to the backup, including all the configurations, the files, and also the runtime dynamic object, which including sessions, IPsec information, SSL information, the DNS, the ARP table, the PKI information, DHCP, MAC table, and also the web authentication information. So all those will be shared, will be synchronized from the master to the backup. And one, we will do the switchover between the HA devices. Here are some scenarios that will call the switchover. First of all, is the preempt. As I mentioned before, if you set the preempt value in master device, if master device failed, so normally the traffic will be switched to the backup device. And after some time, if the original master device restored, and this master device will try to take over all the traffic back from the temporary master device. So that is the preempt, which also, in this case, it will call the switchover from the temporal master device to the original master. The second scenario will be the switchover will cost due to the track field. As I mentioned, we need to set the track object for the egress interface of the master firewall. If the track failed, that means the link was done. In this case, it will also switch over all the traffic from the master to backup. The third one will be the master device reboot. If the master device crashed, so all the traffic will be switched to the backup. The last scenario will be happen in the data center firewall, which is the chassis based. If the service module or the IO module was plugged out or crashed, so the data center firewall will also has a switchover between the master and backup. The HA failover mechanism, which help to assure the network availability and avoid the interruption caused by the single point failure. So once the original master device physical interface down or up, it will impose peripheral switches to clean the mark forward table. And the new master device will send a free ARP message to refresh this mark table of these switches and then steal the traffic. Here is one example for the switchover in the active passive HA. As you can see in this topology, we have two firewalls. One is firewall 1, another is firewall 2. So basically, firewall 1 working under master and firewall 2 working under the backup. So firewall 1 is transferring and forwarding all the traffic. It handling all the traffic. And we set one object track. We send one track object to track the Ethernet 0/1, which is the egress status that connect to the internet. If this egress interface down, the track will fail. And the firewall 1 will change its own state to failed status, as I mentioned. It will change the state to failed, and it will automatically down and up the both downstream and upstream interfaces. It will try to down and up both interfaces. And then it will send the hello package to the backup to inform this failure to the backup. And meantime, the backup will change the status to be a master. And also both virtual mark and virtual IP will be switched to the firewall 2 for the traffic forwarding. And firewall 2 will send the GARP from both downstream and upstream interface to refresh the ARP table. And finally, the traffic will be forwarded to in this case. Okay, great. So let's continue for the configuration. All right, let's see how to configure for the HA in Stone Firewall. This is a typical scenario for the active-passive deployment for two firewalls. As you can see, we have one firewall worked as master, another one worked as backup, and we need to configure for the HA link as well to synchronize for the all the information and also send the heartbeat packet, And those will be the configuration steps for the active-passive HA, active-passive HA. So most of the configurations should be done in the master device. Most of the configurations should be done in the master device. The backup only need to configure for the local management IP and also the configuration for the HA part, All the other configuration will be synchronized from the master, So first of all, in the master device, we need to configure for the basic functions, and then you need to configure the HA track object to track the egress interface of the master, and also configure for the HA group to specify the priority at master, and also in the backup device, you also need to specify for the priority, and also these HA related parameters. When configuring the HA link, you need to specify the interface that you used for the HA link connection. And then you need to specify one IP address for the interface, for the HA link interface at both firewall. So this is the direct connected HA link. And this link will be used for the synchronization of all this traffic and packet between the master and the backup. And you also need to configure for the HA cluster, the ID of the cluster, and also enable some other HA functions. Here is the configuration in the master device. First of all, as I mentioned, you need to configure for some basic functions that make sure the master firewall is able to successfully connect to internet. So you have some interface configuration. For the egress interface, you bind to untrust, assign with public IP, and for the LAN interface, you bind to trust and assign with private IP. And also you need a policy to forward all the traffic, to permit all the traffic, which is from any to any, service any, permit. And you also need to configure for the destination route, which is all zero means to all the destinations through the gateway IP from ISP. And also you may need a SNAT. If you have multiple hosts need to access to internet by sharing one public IP. So you need SNAT. After that, the device and your internal users should be able to visit internet through the firewall. And then we need to configure for the HA. First of all, we need to configure for a track object, which to track the interface status. Especially you need to check the both upstream and downstream interfaces of the master device. And you also need to configure for the HA, including the cluster, the group, the priority. If you want to enable the preempt, you can set it at the master device. But better not use that at the actual environment, because the prompt will also cause one-time switchover. So in this case, you need to be more careful. And you can also set the HA link. You can set multiple HA link. In redundant. If one link down, the second link will help to communicate with the backup by sending the hello packet. And you also need to assign the IP for the HA link interface. And this is the cluster. This is the cluster setting. Finally, please don't forget to set the local management IP for both the master device and the backup device. This IP is used for firewall management purpose. And backup, as I mentioned, you don't need to configure for all the settings, but just the local management IP and also the HA configurations. All the other configurations will be synchronized from the master. If both devices working in active environment, you need to set additionally HA group. All the other configurations should be the same, but you need to configure for both group 0 and group 1, because both firewalls need to work simultaneously at the same time. So the firewall in group 0 may work as master, and in group 1, it will also work as a backup. So in this case, you need to set for both HA settings in group 0 and group 1, in group 1. And for the firewall that worked as a backup, you just need the basic management configuration and HA configuration. So that is the active. So you need to configure two HA instance. So both firewalls are working in master and backup at different HA group, to handling the traffic at the same time. Here are some commonly used troubleshooting commands for the HA. Just give you some idea how to do the troubleshooting in the HA environment. Show version. You can use show version to check all the firmware version, the hardware model, and also the license that installed at both devices, as I mentioned. So you need to have identical hardware model, firmware, service, license installed. And show HA group 0, well, to check the HA group information between these two devices, like the priority, the track object, the print, etc. You can also use show HA link status to check the HA link, and show HA flow statistics to check the packet flow, and show HA protocol to check the status of the bidirectional heartbeat packets, Or you can ping the peer IP of the heartbeat link to check if the heartbeat link is normal or not. Or you can also show the interface to check the MAC address table of the HA interface and debug. Okay, debug is the one that you use to do some deep analysis for the device status and also negotiation status, synchronization status. You also can check both up and down switches or routers to see if the mark learning and port learning status is normal or not. Or you can also capture the package for further analysis. Here I have two identical firewalls. Both are in same hardware model. As you can see from the dashboard, this one is E2300. The other one is also E2300. So both are using same model. And also the firmware version, as you can see, this is 5.5 R7P5, and this one is the same. And this one is the same. So both one also, they are also using the same firmware version. And the license, you need to check both are installed with the same types of the license. To make sure both can handling the similar service. So in this case, we can set up the HA between both firewalls. So the master firewall, after you set, actually I already pre-configured for both. Just save the time. As you can see, the firewall 1, the A already working under master, and the B is working under backup. So all the configurations, the network configurations had been done. The interface, all the configurations had been done in the master device, like policy, like network, routings, all those had been done in the master. And backup will synchronize all those from the master device, as you can see here. It will synchronize all this information from the master. And the key configuration between the master and backup is in master. In the HA part, we need to configure for both we need to configure for the HA link. As you can see here, we can set two control link. So if you configure for two control link, that you need to have two interfaces for HA. You have two interfaces that used for the HA link. By default, our middle end and high end will have fixed port dedicatedly for the HA purpose. For those low end device, if you don't have the dedicated HA port, you can choose any of the Ethernet interface to be used as the HA interface. You can set two HA control link that work in redundant. So by default, the hello packets will be sent through the link interface 1. If this link failed, down, the hello package will be sent through the interface 2. You can also set a dedicated data link. So this is optional. If you don't want to set, so all those hello packets, the management information and those data flow will be will be transferred through the control link, Or you can set dedicated data link to forward all those data and session. So that is for control link and data link configuration. You also need to set the IP address for this link interface, for the HA link interface. So cluster, if only 2 working in HA, you set as same cluster ID, okay. And the IP address for both must be in same network segment. And also, you need to configure for the group configuration, HA group, because in this case, we're deploying the firewall in active passive mode. We only need to configure for one group, which is group 0. We have the priority value. So the smaller one will have higher priority. So this one was at 100 had been promoted as a master. So this one, smaller value is high priorities. This one already promoted as a master. And this one, because the priority number is bigger, so it's the backup. And preempt, if 0, that means non-preemption. So backup will not do the preempt. But we said if you want to do the preempt, so after the master, as I mentioned, after the master failed and got recovered, so the original master device will also take all the traffic back and preempt himself as master again. So need to remember this. And hello interval threshold, that is quite easy part. So that is the basic configuration for the HA. After you have configured for this and also the interface connected between both devices for the HA link, so both devices will start to initiate the negotiation for the HA status. And after the negotiation, you will see the status for both devices. One will be master, another will be backup, and another will be backup. And you also need to configure one track object. It's better to configure one track object to track both upstream and downstream interface in the master device. Okay, to monitor the interface status. As long as the interface or the link down, it will notify to the backup, and then the traffic will be automatically switched to the backup device, and backup will start to handling the traffic as a new backup, as a new master. So that is the basic configuration for the HA, active passive mode.